Kirby games on Nintendo Switch. It seems like there's a never-ending amount of them, and Nintendo loves this tiny little pink guy. There's no doubt that us Kirby fans have gotten absolutely spoiled by the huge library of Kirby games on this console. From Forgotten Fighters to instant classics, there's a Kirby game for everyone. But not every Kirby game is a complete dream, and some might even consider a few of these titles to suck, because Kirby literally sucks. So let's take a look at every Kirby game on Nintendo Switch. And as we go through them, we will be throwing them in a beautiful little tier list. Wait, no, actually, let's make this a big one. You can thank me later. Starting with Kirby Star Allies. Releasing March 16th, 2018. This was the very first Kirby game to come out on Nintendo Switch. It is very similar to the past 3DS entries where you play as Kirby in various 2.5D levels. But it was the first time since Kirby's Return to Dreamland that you'd be able to have 4 players in local co-op in a Kirby game. This time around, instead of playing as the classic characters like King Dedede, Meta Knight, and Bandana D, the additional players would be able to play as a handful of enemies Kirby would encounter throughout the stages. Kirby just casually grabs a heart and throws it at the enemies, and boom, they're on your side now. If only that worked in real life. This game had an incredibly similar premise to the cancelled Kirby GameCube game that also had playable enemies. It looks like they just sort of repurposed that idea here. They also brought back a big gimmick with copy abilities, which we first saw in Kirby 64 Crystal Shards, which was the ability to merge powers together like fire and sword, giving you a fire sword. This game also just isn't very hard and was a breeze to get through. I bought this game on day 1, and you better believe I had a blast playing it through with my brother for about 6 hours, because it felt like I blinked and then the game was over. It was that short. But aside from length, because we all know it's not about the length, it's about the experience you have while you're playing the short game. And I have to say, after revisiting this game, I think it's heavily overshadowed by the newer titles. I completely forgot about how good this game actually was. But that's what happens after 6 years, I guess. The controls felt great. The combat was way more in depth than I remember. There's many game modes, and of course the graphics look gorgeous. Jumping felt snappy, fighting felt satisfying, and of course it's just a great time running around as Kirby. And while the story mode is rather short, it's very charming and will definitely be worth your while, especially with friends. I specifically love the game mode Guest Star. You can choose between a whole cast of classic Kirby enemies and bosses that have never been playable in any Kirby game. And since this is my first time revisiting since launch, I completely forgot about the amount of iconic Kirby characters they added to the game. The Animal Trio, Megalore, Susie, and my freaking boy, Marx! Marx! There he is. There's Marx. If I remembered I could play as Marx, I would have thrown all my other games out. And each of these characters have unique movesets and special levels while you play through this mode. So that's great, but it reminds me, the main gimmick is literally befriending enemies while you play, thus being called Star Allies. The whole game is built around you finding these Star Allies and working with them as CPUs or in local co-op to complete puzzles and get through the stages. And while that seems like a great concept, it can definitely get a little repetitive at times, especially when you just want to play single player but you need to use these CPUs to help you get through the stage. It's also kind of annoying for second, third, and fourth player to join, as they'll need you to capture an enemy before they're even able to play. And even when they do join, it feels like they're just there to aid you on your quest instead of everyone being on a quest together. Debatably, that's how all Kirby games feel, but I think the main complaint of this game in the community is the frame rate, which is stuck at 30 frames per second. And yes, for a 2.5D platformer, 30 frames per second isn't the most appealing, and obviously would be much better at a smooth 60. But regardless, this allows them to make the overall graphics amazing, and probably the best I've seen out of any 2.5D Kirby game. So Nintendo enabled graphics mode on this one. Oh, and the music slaps. Overall, while it's a fantastic game, the length, frame rate, and main gimmick were a little uneven, but not completely ruining this amazing game, so I'm gonna put it in A. Next is Super Kirby Clash, which released on September 4th, 2019. This is the one and only free-to-play Kirby game, and is a sequel to the 3DS game Team Kirby Clash Deluxe, which is an enhanced version of the sub-game in Kirby Planet Robobot. This is a fighting game that allows you to fight up to 4 Kirbys using local multiplayer or online play, or you can use CPUs as well. Even back in the day when this game was released, I wasn't in love with this as much as I wanted to be, mainly put off by the mobile feel this game had, with its goofy microtransactions and its lackluster gameplay style and graphics. The gameplay loop is simple. You do quests, which include you fighting one massive boss, you get gems to upgrade your weapon and armor, and that's about it. I think this game has some potential, but I couldn't mesh with the horrific fighting mechanics of this game. Maybe I'm just picky after the plethora of fantastic fighting games like Smash Bros, which by the way, also have Kirby in it. But this was very hard to get into and left me feeling like I was just button mashing half the time. And it really shows one of the major flaws I find in most Kirby games, with close combat action, which is when you use close combat abilities like the sword, and you can't get too close because you're easy to hit, but if you're not close enough then you can't hit the enemy at all, the spacing just feels off. But that's just a personal gripe of mine, and I feel it's handled a bit better in later games. I really tried to get into it, but I just didn't love the bland fighting. So I tried one of the online features, which this game really wants you to play, and playing this online was a nightmare, because there's so much latency. What what's even the point? On top of the latency, this game runs at a choppy 30 frames per second, which is really not ideal for a fighting game like this. This might be fine for a lot of younger players, but it makes a lot more experienced gamers like me scoff at the idea of even taking this game seriously. But at least Kirby is cute. I gotta throw this in D. Even though it's an interesting concept, the idea seems pointless and a waste of time, especially when comparing some other heavy-hitting free-to-play fighting games on console like Brawlhalla. So next we have another Kirby fighting game, Kirby Fighters 2. This is the only Kirby game on Switch that I haven't played until now. I just thought this was going to be another Super Kirby Clash situation. The original Kirby Fighters was a sub-game in Kirby Triple Deluxe on 3DS, which was a free-for-all fighting game which made you fight against 3 other Kirbys and featured various stages and items. You can even play with others who had the game. Later on, this would get a standalone deluxe version as a completely separate paid release called Kirby Fighters Deluxe, with enhanced fighting mechanics and added features like team battle, new stages, and cosmetics. So with the success of those 2 games, the Switch version was born, with new copy abilities, new and returning stages, and even more cosmetics. Getting into Kirby Fighters 2, it's clear it's very similar to the previous entry. Unlike Kirby Clash, the fighting is a lot better. You can just feel it. Hits have impact, and it feels like you're actually damaging the enemy. A lot of the fighting does come down to button mashing, but you can still get a pretty surprising amount of variety out of one ability, especially for a Kirby game. It's pretty much as if they took the abilities from Star Allies and copy and pasted them here. The purpose of this game is to just rank up, and you can do so mainly by going through the story mode as you travel to the top of the tower to get King DDD and Meta Knight. But you can also rank up using online mode. Using online mode. Online mode! Ah, dang it, no one seems to be online anymore. Yep, it looks like it's time to pull the sheet over its head and call this game deceased. Thankfully, it doesn't rely too heavily on this, as you can seemingly unlock everything offline through playing the game on story mode or using the single-handed mode. This is once again another short and sweet kind of game, and you can play it for several hours unlocking new abilities and cosmetics. If you really wanted to complete the whole game, it would take about 90 hours. This game is just a better version of Super Kirby Clash in almost every way. Better combat, better unlockables, and you pay up front instead of getting scammed with microtransactions like a fool. This game is also the first Kirby game on Switch to have a smooth 60 frames per second that us gamers crave for. But this just feels like a really watered down fighting game. It's essentially Smash Bros for people who are too cheap to buy Smash Bros. Smash Bros, but we have Smash Bros at home. Smash Bros if you bought it off Wish. Take your pick. So overall, it can be a fun short escape from reality, but it's nothing super special, and it's quite forgettable. So I'm gonna have to put it in C tier. And next is Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which was released on March 25th, 2022. Needless to say, a 3D Kirby game was a dream come true. I mean, just look at how I reacted.
Kirby! Oh my gosh!
I was quite a silly goose. But seriously, a 3D Kirby game was something I've been wanting forever, and they pulled it off perfectly. Well, close to perfect. From the music to the graphics, this game was phenomenal. As you go through this massive 3D world, you are tasked with collecting all the stolen Waddle Dees, because Kirby likes them now, I guess. So throughout each stage, you'll have to find 3 hidden Waddle Dee cages, and by doing certain tasks in the level, like guiding baby ducks to their mother, you'll get more Waddle Dees as well. Not only are you trying to find Waddle Dees, but sprinkled through each stage is a ton of gacha toys that will be unlocked at the end of the level. And there are a lot. And this just encourages you to go buy more and more. And you can get gachas in another way too, like mini games and the vending machines. The story mode itself is so fun. The environments change so often, and you never feel like you're getting bored with just one world over and over again. You can't forget about the copy abilities, now fleshed out in 3D. And not only that, but each of these copy abilities can be upgraded by using star crystals, which you can obtain with these treasure roads, which are little time trial challenges you can play using specific Kirby copy abilities. You can also get star crystals by playing the arena mode, which are all the bosses from the main campaign. And more, all crammed into one event. It's like the classic arena mode, but as you finish them, more difficult arenas get unlocked. And oh boy, it's a good spicy meatball. So obviously you can see I'm passionate about this game. This was awesome and has to be one of my favorite games on Switch. Just the way little Kirby jiggles around each stage is so satisfying. And while you level up, you can upgrade your home base, all while playing with a friend in local co-op as Bandana D. And of course, the soundtrack makes me a happy guy. This game was clearly a success, with it now being the most sold Kirby game in the entire franchise, beating out Kirby's Dreamland on Game Boy. The only issue fans seem to have with this is the frame rate being 30 frames per second. But hey, whatever, it still looks great. Obviously, if you can't tell, I'm putting this in S tier. I'm so excited for a sequel, I might just have to shave my legs. Next is Kirby's Dream Buffet. Literally, it's on my keychain. This game was randomly announced on Twitter and then released shortly after. Such a surprise, especially after the amazing Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This is another one of those $20 Kirby side games that has just enough juice to get $20 worth out of it. Similar to Kirby Fighters 2, except here, instead of having some sort of watered down fighting game that has been done to death, this is an all new experience that we've never really seen other games do. A brand new concept that makes you roll around as Kirby through stages and play mini games, all while leveling up to collect cosmetics and cute Kirby memorabilia. This is sort of like a 3D Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, which had Kirby rolling around in a 2D stage while you scribbled on the Wii U gamepad. This is a really solid deal for $20. It doesn't have the dumb microtransaction tropes that a free-to-play game would usually have. Instead, everything is unlockable in the game, online or offline. As you go through stages, you are rolling as Kirby against 3 other Kirbys and a bunch of Waddle Dees. The goal is to get as many strawberries by the end of 2 races and 2 mini games. You start off with 1 race, the winner of that race gets bonus strawberries, then it moves on to the randomly selected minigame, which can have you bonk enemies for strawberries or smash open cookie boxes, and so on. You then move to the second race, and then you go to a fighting arena, which has the 4 Kirbys duke it out, where your main goal is stealing strawberries from other players by throwing them off stage with the various copy abilities the game gives you. This can be very hectic and can completely change the flow of things. And that's it. Literally, you do that over and over again. Now, the stages and gameplay elements change very often, and it's rare that you're given the same stage repeatedly. And if you like the gameplay loop, you could play this for several hours at a time, like I did. And it's also really fun with friends in online play and local co-op play. Though it's a little better with online play because the other player can pick their skin. I think it's so cool that this game can be played for hours and everything can be unlocked without shelling out more cash. And I think the sheer amount of cosmetics and unlockables make this game even more worth it. Every Kirby game is represented here and is on full display. And you can even decorate your cake with these decorations. Heck, there's even a free roll mode that lets you just roll around as Kirby in an open area, and there's even little callbacks to all the previous Switch titles in cookie form. This game does feature an online mode, but just like Kirby Fighters 2, it's pretty dead now. When I was recently playing this game, I couldn't even find additional players, and it would just tell me that there were people playing, but I knew they weren't real. I only played online mode because it gives you 1.8 times the amount of XP, which is great for unlocking all the unlockables, but you can do this while playing offline. It just takes a little bit longer, but I love having that option. It's clear they just did this because Nintendo wanted you to play online with other players. Although I do remember when people were online, if the connection wasn't great, it would be very sluggish at times. Overall, it's clear this game was a fun little experiment that us Kirby fans never really expected, but I'm glad to have it. It's obviously not a full Kirby adventure, but it does the trick, and it's definitely a fun game to add to Kirby's catalog. I'm putting this in B. And of course, the most recent release, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, the remake of a Wii game that originally released over 10 years ago. If you've seen my video where I rank all the 2023 Switch games, you'll know my opinion on it. I really liked it. It's the definitive way to play Kirby's Return to Dreamland. The main story mode is a classic. Go through levels, collecting gears, and I'll prepare Magolor's ship. That's great, I'm gonna do that. Chances are you've already experienced this game at one point, and it still holds up after 10 years. It's a great 2D game, and it's enhanced further with the local co-op features. Not only is the iconic story mode a blast to play through, but you also have challenges for all the power-ups in Magolor's ship that a single player can play. Very similar to the Treasure Road challenges in Forgotten Land. The better you do, the higher your rank is on the door, and trust me, it takes a while to get gold on all the doors. And there's even new challenges made just for this game, which include the brand new power-ups this game introduced, like Mecha and Sand. If you don't want to do challenges or story mode, you can always go to Merry Magoland, which has a massive amount of Kirby sub-games from across the series. By playing them and completing challenges, you'll unlock a wide variety of masks, which players can use throughout the game and the main game. And on top of that, there's Arena Mode, which is fighting all the main story bosses, and there's also Magolor's Epilogue, which is a brand new story about this character after the end of the main story. You can go through the brand new stages and upgrade your abilities. Yet again, another short and sweet experience. But it's really a blast to go through, and I can't believe they added 2 whole game modes just for this remake. It's wild! And let's not forget about the fact that once you're done the main story, you can play it all again in hard mode. So yeah, this is filled with content, and I had a blast going through it. And obviously, I'm pretty nostalgic for it, as I played the Wii game back when it first released. So I'm gonna put this in A. And that's all the Kirby games on Nintendo Switch. Oh, what the?
That's not all the Kirby games on Nintendo Switch.
Of course it is. What are you talking about?
No! You're forgetting the Nintendo Switch Online Kirby games.
No, those aren't Switch games.
Yes, they are.
Okay, well, they're on Switch, but they're not Switch games.
Yes.
Fine. We can't forget about the Nintendo Switch online games. Now, technically these aren't Nintendo Switch games, but we should briefly cover them, and I'll quickly add them to the tier list, and we'll go through any unique quirks that these have on Nintendo Switch, because there are some unique quirks. First is, of course, Kirby's Dreamland. Kirby's very first adventure when nobody knew his color, and he was just white. It was originally released in 1991 on the first Game Boy. It's obviously fun to replay this game to see how far Kirby has come, but you can tell it's dated. And compared to the other games on this list, I'll throw it in C. Next is, of course, Kirby's Adventure. Originally released in 1993 on NES, this is a classic and feels really great and actually holds up to this day. Obviously, the abilities and the controls are a little more limited here, but it's great to play the classic games from the NES on the Switch in the crisp glory. And for all these Nintendo Switch Online games, I really like taking advantage of the specific pausing features and the rewind feature. I think that's really cool. This one goes in B tier. Next is Kirby's Dream Course, which came out in 1995 on SNES. It's okay. It's essentially Kirby Golf, which makes use of Kirby's spherical body. As you go through courses, you eliminate enemies to get to the exit. You can also use copy abilities which change things around. Pretty much, you line up a shot and shoot Kirby, and you try to get on the hole with the least amount of hits as possible. It's okay, but personally, this goes in C. Then there's Kirby's Dreamland 2, which released in 1995 on Game Boy. Very similar to the first game, but more fleshed out. I never really went back to this game or played it, but after playing for a short amount of time, this goes in C. Next is Kirby Avalanche. This is like Tetris, where things fall from the top, and in the likes of Puyo Puyo, but Kirby themed. I really don't love these kind of games, and I find it a tad boring, so I'm throwing it in D. I'm sorry! Next we got Kirby Superstar, which released in 1996 on SNES. Now I didn't play this game much growing up, mainly because I wasn't born yet, but I did play a ton of Kirby Superstar Ultra on DS, which is the enhanced version. And this is a great way to experience the majority of that game here. It's a bunch of fun with little adventures all in one, so this is an easy A tier. Next, Kirby Dreamland 3, also on SNES, released in 1997. This was once again another 2D side-scroller, which had Kirby being helped by these animal creatures. Honestly, I never really even played this game until I made this video. It seems promising. My first impressions, I'm just gonna throw it in a safe B, but I'm excited to play it more after this video is done. And the last game on SNES is Kirby Star Stacker. This was originally published in 1997 on the Game Boy. I can already kind of tell that this isn't really for me. And honestly, I completely forgot this game even existed. It was first released in 1998 through the Nintendo Power Flash service in Japan, but eventually saw a physical release a year later in 1999. The Super Famicom version was the only console to get this game, and the Nintendo Switch Online service is the only way us here in North America are able to legally play it. Personally, I think it's better than Kirby Avalanche, but I'm not a huge fan of stacking games like Dr. Mario or Tetris, so I'm also going to put it in D. Next, we have Kirby Tilt and Tumble on Game Boy Color, which released in 2001. This has to be one of the coolest uses of NSO there is. The original game used accelerometers to control Kirby in-game, which meant the players had to physically tilt their Game Boy to move Kirby. The thing is, back then, the Game Boy lacked accelerometers. So the game cartridge itself had its own built-in one that stuck out from the Game Boy that made it possible for you to control Kirby. It was encased in a transparent pink cartridge, which was so unique back then. So when they brought it to Switch Online, they took it as an opportunity to remap the buttons by using these Switch gyro features. That's so awesome! And this game is actually pretty fun and can feel quite tense. You go through stages and try to avoid obstacles. It's a very Kirby game, and an incredibly unique concept. I'm putting this in B. Next is the NSO expansion games. Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards. This was the first 2.5D Kirby game that showed off a brand new 3D model. Even though the game is still extremely linear, it's a fun time. And this game uses copy abilities in a unique way too. Not only does it morph Kirby into a wild monster, but just like in Star Allies, you're able to merge certain abilities together. The game is super charming and has lots of unique features that would eventually be revisited in future Kirby installments. But I can't help but feel Kirby was a little more difficult to control and the movement seemed really slow. But overall, I'm gonna put it in B. And last but not least is Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, released in 2004 on Game Boy Advance. This is a very similar art style to the more modern DS Kirby games, which I really liked, but was primarily based on its predecessor, Kirby Nightmare and Dreamland, which for whatever reason didn't make it to the NSO at the time of recording this. Just like in Tilt and Tumble, this too does something very unique that makes this version stand out on Switch. This game has a great multiplayer feature, but back on the GBA, players would have to have a GBA link cable to play with their friends, which a lot of players likely just never had a chance to try out. But what's great about the NSO version is you can now play 4-player local co-op, and you can play with 3 friends online, which makes this the only 2D adventure Kirby game that allows online co-op, which is wild. I remember the game itself being really fun, but having additional people to play with would be amazing. amazing, and is why I'm putting the NSO version of this game in A. If you felt I was too harsh on the NSO games, please let me know in the comments what you think, as a lot of these games came out before I was even born. But I will go revisit them more in extent if you feel like I should. But yeah, that's actually every Kirby game on Nintendo Switch for now, at least at the time of recording this. Are you happy? Are you freaking happy?
Yes, thank you.
If you like this video and Kirby, please consider liking and subscribing. Also, you can join the community and join the Discord. And of course, if you want to support me and see exclusive content and early content, consider becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. See you later.